Us to the sublime, we're going to ask the CEO for Qualys, Philippe Courteau, to present his keynote in Looking into the Future, the Road Ahead, a New and Promising Journey for the Security Professionals. Philippe.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim, and it's a real pleasure to be with you this morning, and it's also gratifying to see how the Cloud Security Alliances has grown since we started in the late 2008 and has grown into a global independent organization, as we know, with a mission of really bringing, security to the cloud. So in the 10 minutes, in the 20 minutes that we have here, I would like to share with you my views on cloud security and what does it mean for security. And what is fascinating after listening to the presentation of Mark Benioff and Vivek and Chris is that, in fact, albeit we look at the problem from different angles, we essentially say the same thing. We're using the same words: exponential, scale, obviously disruptive. And so before starting my presentation, I would like to ask a few questions. How many of you have in the audience believed today that cloud computing is disruptive to the entire high-tech industry? So we have about 20% of the audience. What about a year ago? How many of you believed that it was a disruptive? Much less. And 5 years ago? Almost no one. So let's look essentially at, would we have predicted 5 years ago that 600 million people on the planet will share their social lives on a single network? Would we have predicted 5 years ago that Amazon will emerge from becoming a major high-tech company bringing cloud computing to the market? Would we have predicted that Microsoft will not rule the world of mobile computing? And in fact, today, it's a distant third player. That Apple computer, in 4 years, will have shipped about 100 million iPods, and then change, essentially, the desktop with the iPad, and in a year, sell 15 million. And even in other domains, who will have predicted that this venerable American institution, the New York Stock Exchange, will change from a private and cozy partnership to a public company, then acquiring Euronext, and then now about to be sold to a German company. So what is interesting is that if you would have read a fantastic paper by Ray Kurzweil published in 2001, that would not have surprised you. And in fact, we saw that in the toiletry. What Ray did is essentially demonstrate and analyze that technologies, in fact, are building in an exponential way. When we humans, we essentially have much more a building system which make us think linear. And in fact, that was at the core of the very discussion I had with Bill Gates about 6 years ago about the disruptive nature of cloud computing, where in fact Bill was arguing that it takes time for new technology to change other. So obviously, if you look only at 2 points, it's linear. But now when you start to look back at the previous points, and of course, if you could anticipate the future, you will absolutely realize that in technology, we have to think exponential and not linear. And that's one of the key messages I would like to leave with you today. And in fact, you saw that in every presentation this morning. So obviously, cloud computing is really presenting a major shift in IT and IT security. And Mark Benioff gave a fantastic presentation about the power of the cloud, and what I would like to give to you is an inside view of the cloud. What makes that cloud so powerful inside? So fundamentally, unlike enterprise computing, which is a very heterogeneous, distributed environment, cloud computing is very fractal. And the very fact that, in fact, we build a fractal system, it has a lot of advantages. It's all about scale and automation. Fractal is the ideal system to essentially create scale, and we see that in Mother Nature. I don't know what happened here. Okay. So what is interesting here is that because we want to build at scale, we prefer using open source components. And in fact, some of you may recall that people were laughing at the Google guys, which were modifying the Apache servers instead of using, more enterprise, product. It provides us a much better control in the infrastructure, and you saw that in the presentation, of course, of Mark. It's, as a result, less costly and easier to secure because we can bring automation to the problem. And because we are not dependent anymore on this very long development cycle, because we can also integrate automated regression testings into our platforms, then obviously we can have significantly shorter development cycle and respond much better to the technological changes as well as to the need of the customers. And as a result, this obviously presents a major challenge to establish businesses, because on the top of that, because we have now built that infrastructure which can essentially deploy software at the four corners of the universe at very minimum cost, we can also start to build derivative business models, and this is what you see with Google search being free, or the freemium services that now are coming our way in security as well. So, and more fundamentally, the big change is that it's not anymore about delivering technology as a product. It is now delivering technology as a service, and the big advantage for the user, obviously, is that you can try. It's much easier to try a service than it is to try a product. And if you don't like it, you don't buy it. And by the way, you can also switch much more easily. So, with this in mind, let's go back and look at our corporate networks. What is happening here? I think if 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we didn't have a very clear picture, I think today the picture is becoming extremely clear. So our corporate network, as we know, are becoming increasingly difficult to administer and to secure. And corporations are essentially using cloud computing technology, shrinking, as we saw in the case of IBM, consolidation of data centers, moving into virtualization, moving users out of the intranet onto the internet, and also moving applications to SaaS delivery. Who in his right mind today will buy a CRM system which is not in the cloud? Nobody. HR applications are also moving extremely fast into the cloud. And also, companies are now renting application and systems and at companies like Azure, Microsoft, etc. And in fact, there's a slew of new cloud computing offering coming our way. The major telco, which sits on the very high-speed pipes, have a natural interest at essentially building on those pipes to deliver, a slew of cloud computing services. And Verizon has a major initiative, as you know, and also a company like Fujitsu, which has major data centers everywhere, has also a very significant cloud computing offering.